Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about all of the upsets from this past weekend. Tennessee, Michigan, and USC going down. Really weird week over there in the Big Ten, and definitely one that we will probably continue to go back to as we go throughout the rest of this year. But definitely going to be incredible to watch that unfold. But let's get into this A&M win. Absolutely huge win for the Aggies, and one that likely would have been the number one story from this Saturday, but now it's the fifth because of how crazy this week was. But let's jump in here and let's break this down here for a second. Missouri just got rolled in this game. It wasn't even remotely close pretty much from the jump. And there was a call early on in this game that Missouri fans are really angry about. I'm sorry, you got beat 41-10. I'm not necessarily going to talk about anything with the refs. Huge amount of respect for Mike Elko. I think this was one of those games I heard Connor Wegman was starting and got a little bit nervous. I'll be totally honest with you. I said, what else can Marcel Reed do? He has won 2 games for you with 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, helped the run game a ton. What more can he do to get this job? Obviously, I was very much wrong because Connor Wegman was incredible in this game. Did everything you possibly could have asked him to do. 18 for 22, 276 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. That's what they need going forward. They don't need to be a super dynamic team through the air. They don't need to stretch the field the way a Miami does or the way a Tennessee does. They just need to stay in front of the chains, make the play that's in front of them, and then let their quarterback have some time, which is incredibly what they did on Saturday. And then another piece of this is just this team is as prepared as I've ever seen them. When you go back to the Jimbo Fisher days, there were a number of moments where they just looked ill-prepared for a game. They looked like they were kind of scared of the team on the other sideline, and they would go out there and just outright get beaten, and kind of get beaten in this fashion, frankly. And they were able to hand it out to someone. It was incredible to watch this team, and frankly, I think that's the biggest difference from this team to last year is just the energy around them. They're not the same in terms of just the way that they approach games, and it's very clear by the time they step on the field. And we got to talk about Le'Veon Moss. He's an absolute dude. He's someone that really kind of turned it up when Marcel Reed took over, and makes sense. When you have a little bit of an advantage in the box with numbers, you're going to have a little bit more success. He had tons of success on Saturday. He was absolutely huge for this team. Threw the final knockout punch early on in that second half with a touchdown run of, I believe, 75 yards. He was special in this game. One of those guys that might be as important as just about anyone on that team going forward. And then Missouri, they're just who they are. I think we saw what they were early on in the season, wanted to believe that they could flip a switch at some point. This was the time to do it. There's no two ways about that. This was the game to flip that switch to really, put your CFP hopes in really clear terms. They weren't able to do that. So a lot of missed opportunities for Missouri in this game, but more than anything, just came out really flat and just got absolutely railroaded. How A&M won this game, you just got to give Connor Wegman time. When we came into the season, we were talking about him as a possible, first-round draft pick and so many different things that we were talking about him about. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't just, people were totally wrong about what Connor Wegman is. He's a very dangerous player. He's a guy that can do stuff with a football that not a lot of guys around the country can do. He just has to be given time to do that. And frankly, I lean towards Marcel Reed as the starter because of the offensive line. I didn't feel like they were at a place where they could protect this guy to the extent that they absolutely had to. They did that and then some on Saturday. They were absolutely incredible at the point of attack and did everything they possibly could have wanted. And then Connor Wegman executed at a ridiculously high level. So everything worked pretty perfectly. And then you never took your foot off the gas. There's so many different moments in this game where A&M could have said, okay, we'll just run the ball to victory. We'll, handle things. And they did do that late in this game. But the reality is, coming out of halftime, you're up 24-0. I know they just got a one-play touchdown that was a run. But the reality is you stepped on their throat. And that's the biggest part of this game is, as we saw in a game we're just about to talk about, you got to make sure you step on people's throats. You cannot give them a little bit of life in this sport because they will come back. They will make big-time plays, and a team like Missouri that has all the dangerous players on the outside is more than capable of that. So although Missouri didn't look great and they possibly, probably weren't going to win this game regardless, A&M able to kind of step on their throat when they very much needed to is absolutely huge. And then there was no offensive rhythm for Missouri in this game. I don't know what they were doing, frankly, for a lot of this game. I think they were pushing for a lot of this game. They had under 50% completion, 2.3 yards per carry. Just can't happen. This is a too talented of an offense. There's so many different things going for them in this offense that they can't get stonewalled like this, especially in a game like this. So a lot of things to figure out for Missouri. And frankly, where they go from here, I don't really know. I think they're kind of an interesting team that hypothetically they could still flip a switch. Hypothetically, they still have the talent, they still have the ability to make big time plays throughout the rest of the season. this was a loss that proved a lot of the points that we were trying to make early on in this season. They are not necessarily as physical as they need to be at the point of attack. They're not necessarily great on the back end the way that they need to be. And then this offense is not where it needs to be remotely. And frankly, Brady Cook is the number one reason. Now, I don't necessarily think he's a bad player. I think he has every ability to bounce back and be a really solid player the rest of the way. He has to just execute this offense. He has to do a much better job of just taking what's given to him, throwing the ball, 5 yards or whatever it is, and kind of just taking what's in front of you. And then obviously some of this has to do with the game plan going in. I think a lot of that left a lot to be desired. But at the end of the day, Missouri's just got to get more from their offense if they're going to be a dangerous team. And I know the defense didn't play well, but frankly, the offense kind of forced their hand in a lot of different respects. And then for A&M, I mean, it's very, very simple. The goal just became get to the CFP because pretty much everything in front of you is very winnable. Now, you do have LSU, you do have Texas at the end of the season, which could be for an SEC title spot, but we'll get there when we get there. It's going to be an incredible, incredible finish to this season. I think Connor Wegman behind that O-line is as dangerous as pretty much any quarterback in the country. He can do a number of different things that not a lot of people can do, and I think he's one of those players that we could look up at the end of the season, and he's having just about as good a year as really any SEC quarterback out there, doing an incredible job, and as long as that O-line plays that way the rest of the season, he's going to be tough to deal with. But I want to move on here and get to this. What happened here? I have no earthly idea how this unfolded, and frankly, it was the weirdest thing to watch. But let's get to this comeback, and let's get to the refs more than anything else, because people like to talk about it right about now, and frankly, I understand it. I didn't love the targeting call. I didn't love the, I believe they were downfield, the offensive lineman on that touchdown. Here's the thing. Cal was up 25 points with 23 minutes left. They were up 20 points in the fourth quarter of this game. There are a million things that the refs would have to do to give you a win in that game. Now, did they help Miami at the end? I would argue yes, but the reality is they shouldn't have been in the position where those calls matter. They shouldn't have been in a position where those calls can change the outcome of a game because Cal should have been ahead. They should have been able to handle this, and frankly, the offensive game planning, the defensive game planning at the end of this game was exactly what Vandy didn't do. It was exactly what a lot of these teams didn't do. They didn't take their foot off the gas. They didn't worry about a team, they did worry about that team coming back. They said, let's just chew clock, give the ball back to this offense. And then this offense did what they do, which is score a lot of points. They're really, really dangerous when you give them time, when you give them the ball back. And that's exactly what Cal did in this game. I understand the refs didn't make the greatest call at the end of the game. Frankly, I don't really care. Miami coming back from 20 points down should never happen regardless of the calls at the end of the game. So I understand being upset. I don't understand blaming it on the refs. I'll just put it that way. But Miami continues to respond. It's absolutely incredible to watch this team. There's so many different things that could have gone wrong in this game and could have buried them in this game, and they found their way to win. It was one of those things that when you have Cam Ward on that sideline, you got a lot of shots to do a lot of things that not a lot of people have the ability to do. So he's a really dangerous player. Obviously, that one pick was downright terrible, one of the worst throws I've ever seen in my entire life. But at the end of the day, they got the job done, did exactly what they needed to do, and the biggest part of this was just kind of taking the punch, handling what was in front of you, and doing what you needed to do. It was a number of different things where Miami, you're down 35-10, and you look up at the scoreboard. It's not easy to feel like you're in that game. It's not easy to say, okay, we're going to come back and we're going to win this one, because not a lot of teams have that ability, and they were able to do that. It was absolutely incredible to watch, and frankly, Cam Ward was magic, as he often is. He made his mistakes, including that pick, but 277 yards in the fourth quarter, 4 touchdown drives in the final 20 minutes of this game. He did everything. He was absolutely incredible and found his way back into the Heisman odds when, frankly, in the first half, he looked like he totally buried his chances to have a Heisman run. And then Cal's defense late was just bad, frankly. They played the thing that a lot of people do, which is play tons of off coverage, allow everything underneath. But the difference was they didn't just do it on one drive. They did it on just about every drive in the fourth quarter, and it allowed Miami to get all these receivers wide open, allowed Xavier Restrepo somehow to get loose on a, I think, 70-yard run at the very end of that game. Just cannot happen, and one of the reasons was Cal's defense in the late parts of that game. Now, where does Cal go from here? I think this is pretty much still a defining moment for this program. I think there's a number of things you can take away. The biggest thing is this crowd was incredible. From game day to that night game, it would have been absolutely incredible if they were able to get that win. But the reality is you have a lot of energy around this program that just wasn't there before. You have a lot of energy because of incredible things that Justin Wilcox and that staff are doing. They're doing incredible, incredible things. And I think there's a number of different things that you can take away from this game and say, we lost when we shouldn't have. And I understand that's very frustrating. There's so many different things that give this program momentum going forward that they just have to harness. And frankly, that crowd is maybe number one. And it was absolutely incredible to watch them throughout the day. Yeah, it was horrible clock management as well, Anthony. I think when you look at that game, it was pretty remarkable that Miami was even allowed the chances to get back in that game. There shouldn't have been reality where they were even given the shot to make those plays down the stretch. But when you are a little bit afraid of the moment, when you handle things a certain way going down the stretch of a game, you give Miami a shot, and you cannot give Miami and Cam Ward a shot. And then for Miami, you got a lot of things to figure out. There's no two ways about that. You cannot keep playing games this way. You cannot keep starting slow, getting dominated offensively, making a couple of mistakes that are just head-scratching at the very best, and then be able to come back. That's not going to happen in every game going forward. You have a number of games that you'll be favored in, and you should win. If you start this way, you probably won't win against a team like Georgia Tech, against a team like Louisville in a couple of weeks. You probably won't win that game if you go down by 25 points. Now, you have plenty of times. You have plenty of things to go forward and plenty of things to feel really, really good about going forward. So more than anything, you won the game. So no worries about that by any means. But there's definitely some things that if Miami doesn't figure out, it could go down in flames. So they're playing with a little bit of fire, but when you get that win, it's more than fine to play with a little bit of fire. They'll figure it out, and we'll see what happens in a couple of weeks against Louisville. But at the end of the day, crazy game. Miami as well as A&M, both really, really fun games, and both kind of did what they needed to do going forward, and A&M especially put themselves in the CFP conversation. Also, Anthony, I think there is some of that. I think some of it is a little bit ridiculous. At the end of the day, I think when we talk about officiating in the sport, so much of it is broken and backwards. But at the end of the day, I think people are allowed to be mad all they want. But if Miami's coming back from 20 points down in the fourth quarter, I'm not remotely going to talk about the rest when I break down that game. So that's the end-all be-all of that. People can be mad as long as they want. I don't think that's the case, and I probably will never think that's the case. But at the end of the day, let's take our third break here, and when we come back, we're just going to get to all the other big results of the weekend. Ole Miss had a huge bounce-back game. SMU got a huge win this weekend that kind of went under the radar. But we'll break it all down right after this, so stick with us.